The sky over Germany is the color of steel. December 1943. 28,000 feet. Cold enough to kill. Inside the cramped cockpit of a P-51 Mustang, Lieutenant Marcus Webb can see his breath even through the oxygen mask. His gloved fingers are numb on the stick. Below him, somewhere in that grey carpet of cloud, is Schweinfurt. Ball-bearing factories, critical targets. The kind that win wars, but his engine temperature gauge is climbing red zone. The needle shivers there like it's terrified of what comes next. Marcus keys his radio. Redbird leader, this is Redbird 5, engine running hot. Repeat, running hot, static. Then a voice, distant, crackling. Copy 5, RTB if you can't hold it. We need every bird we've got. Return to base. Those 3 words taste like failure in his mouth. He taps the gauge with one finger. Stupid. Like that ever worked. But the needle doesn't move. The Merlin engine beneath the cowling is cooking itself alive in the thin air. The radiator can't dump heat fast enough up here. None of them can. It's the Mustang's one fatal flaw, the thing North American aviation couldn't quite solve. Liquid-cooled engines need air, dense air. And at altitude there's nothing but ghosts and cold. Below him the bomber formations are already taking flak. Black puffs blooming like poison flowers. He can see a B-17 trailing smoke, falling out of formation like a wounded bird. Marcus makes a decision. He stays. The engine temperature holds steady in the red. Not climbing, not falling, just burning. He thinks about Eddie Kowalski, his crew chief back in England. The man who signed off on this aircraft 3 hours ago. The man whose modifications aren't in any manual, and Marcus wonders if Eddie just saved his life or signed his death warrant. 6 weeks earlier. Rafe Debden, England. November rain turning the airfield to mud. Eddie Kowalski stands under the wing of a P-51, staring up into the wheel well like he's reading scripture. Water drips off the brim of his cap. He's been out here for 2 hours. Hasn't moved except to lean closer. You planning to marry that airplane, Eddie? He doesn't turn. Recognizes the voice. Sergeant Bill Hooper, good mechanic, follows the book, every page, every word. Just thinking, Eddie says. Thinking's dangerous, Bill says, stepping under the wing beside him. Especially for you. Eddie almost smiles. He's 36 years old. Too old for flight crew, too stubborn for desk work. He grew up in Detroit, worked at Packard before the war, built engines for cars that went faster than they had any right to. He understands machines the way some men understand music. Engine temps are killing us, Eddie says quietly. Pilots are aborting missions, or pushing through and cooking the Merlins. We're losing birds. It's the altitude, Bill says, like Eddie doesn't know. Radiator can't exchange heat efficiently in thin air. North American knows about it. They're working on it. Not fast enough, Bill looks at him sideways. What are you thinking? Eddie points up into the belly of the Mustang. Coolant flow. The system's designed for optimal performance at 10,000 feet. But these boys are fighting at 25,000–30,000. The air up there is a quarter the density. Radiators screaming for airflow it can't get. So what if we increase the intake? Bill goes very still. You mean modify the scoop? Just reshape the inlet. Increase the cross-section. Let more air into the duct. Feed the radiator what it's starving for. That's not approved, Bill says carefully. That's not in the field manual. That's not even close to procedure. I know. You'd be altering the airframe, the aerodynamics. You could create drag, vibration, structural failure. You could kill someone, Eddie. Eddie finally turns to look at him. His face is weathered, creased with grease and exhaustion. But his eyes are steady, or I could save them, he says. The next morning, Eddie skips breakfast, goes straight to the machine shop. The base is just waking up. Pilots stumbling toward the mess, ground crews lighting cigarettes in the pre-dawn gray. He finds a quiet corner, pulls out a piece of chalk, starts sketching on the concrete floor. The Mustang's ventral scoop is elegant, aerodynamic, a beautiful piece of engineering. It sits flush under the fuselage, drawing air in to cool the radiator and oil cooler, then exhausting it out the back. The system works, just not well enough. Eddie draws it from memory. Then he draws it again, bigger, wider mouth, deeper throat, more area for air to flood in. He calculates pressure differentials in his head, Bernoulli's principle. Velocity versus volume. He's never been to engineering school, but he's built enough engines to know what works and what doesn't. By noon, he's cut a template from sheet metal. By evening, he's filed it smooth by midnight. He's alone in the hangar with a single work lamp and Mustang 436837, the one assigned to Lieutenant Marcus Webb. He doesn't ask permission. The modification takes 4 hours. He removes the existing scoop inlet, carefully, reverently. Then he fits the new piece, larger, flared. He hand rivets it in place, seals the edges, steps back. In the dim light, the change is barely visible, just a slightly wider mouth beneath the fuselage. Like the airplane is yawning, he runs his hand along the seam. "Cold metal, solid, please work," he whispers. Behind him, a voice. "What the hell are you doing?" Eddie's heart stops. He turns. Captain Raymond Harlow, engineering officer, clipboard in hand, face like a storm cloud. "Sir, that's an unauthorized modification, Sergeant." "Yes, sir. You just violated about 6 different regulations." "Yes, sir." Harlow steps closer, looks at the scoop, looks at Eddie. His jaw works like he's chewing something bitter. "You got a reason?" Eddie nods. "Engine temps, sir. Pilots are cooking up there. You thought you'd redesign the aircraft." "No, sir, just adjust it." Harlow stares at the modification for a long time, too long. Eddie can hear his own pulse in his ears. Finally, Harlow sighs. "You're either a genius or an idiot, Kowalski." "Might be both, sir. If this bird goes down because of what you did, it's your ass. And mine." "Understood, sir." Harlow taps his clipboard. "I'm gonna walk away." "I didn't see this." "But you put it back to standard if there's any issue. Any vibration, any drag, any damn thing." "Understood." "Yes, sir." Harlow turns, stops, doesn't look back. "And Kowalski?" "Sir?" "If it works, you better do it to the rest of them." 3 days later, Marcus Webb stands beside his Mustang in the cold morning light. Pre-flight walk-around. He checks the wings, the tail, the propeller. Runs his hand along the fuselage. Then he stops, crouches down, stares at the scoop under the belly. It looks different. Bigger. He leans closer. Fresh rivets, clean metalwork, but definitely not standard. Eddie appears beside him. Doesn't say anything. Marcus looks up. "You been messing with my airplane?" "Maybe. This gonna get me killed." "Hope not." Marcus stands, studies Eddie's face. The crew chief's eyes are red-rimmed. He hasn't slept. "What did you do?" Marcus asks. "Gave your radiator more air. Engine should run cooler at altitude." "Should?" "Yeah. You test it?" "You're the test." Marcus laughs. "Can't help it. It's either that or scream." "You're insane." "Probably." Marcus puts his hand on Eddie's shoulder, squeezes once. "Well, guess we'll find out." He climbs into the cockpit. Eddie watches him go. Watches the Mustang taxi out. Watches it take off into the pale sky. Then he walks back to the hangar and starts modifying another scoop. At 24,000 feet, Marcus notices it first. The engine temperature gauge is sitting right where it should be, not creeping, not climbing. Just steady, normal. He frowns, taps the glass. Sometimes these gauges lie, but the engine sounds good. Strong, smooth. He pushes higher. 26,000, 28, 30. The air is so thin up here he can barely breathe even with oxygen. The world below is a patchwork quilt of green and brown. England falling away behind him. The temperature gauge stays green. "Redbird 5, how's your engine temp?" Marcus blinks. Realizes someone's been calling him. Normal, lead, running perfect." "Say again?" "Engine temp is normal. No issues." There's a pause. Then, "Lucky bastard." Marcus smiles behind his mask. "Not luck, Eddie. The mission over Schweinfurt is hell. The sky fills with flak and tracers and burning metal." Marcus stays with the bombers. Tangles with a pair of BF-109s. His hands are shaking, but his engine is cool. Rock steady. He gets one of the 109s, watches it spiral down trailing smoke. Feels nothing. Maybe later he'll feel something. Right now there's only altitude and speed and survival. When he lands back at Debden 3 hours later, his legs barely hold him. He climbs out of the cockpit. His flight suit is soaked with sweat despite the cold. His hands won't stop shaking. Eddie is waiting by the wing. "How'd she do?" Eddie asks. Marcus just looks at him. Then he pulls off his glove and places his bare palm on the cowling. The metal is warm, not blistering, not cooked. "Just warm. You did it," Marcus says. "I stayed at 30,000 for an hour. Engine never went past normal." Eddie's face doesn't change. But something happens behind his eyes. Relief, pride, maybe both. "Good," Eddie says quietly. Marcus grabs him, pulls him into a hug. Eddie stiffens, then relaxes. Pats Marcus's back awkwardly. "You saved my life up there," Marcus says. "Just did my job." "No, you did more than that." Word spreads fast. Within a week, half the squadron's Mustangs have Eddie's modification. The pilots start calling it the Kowalski Scoop, unofficially, quietly, because it's still not approved, still not in the manual, but the engine temps drop. Across the board, abort rates fall. Mission effectiveness climbs. The pilots can stay with the bombers deeper into Germany, higher, longer. The Mustang, already a beautiful machine, becomes something more. Something unstoppable. Eddie works 18-hour days, reshaping scoops, training other mechanics. His hands bleed from the sharp metal edges. He doesn't care. He drinks coffee that tastes like oil and sleeps 3 hours a night and keeps working. In the evenings, sometimes he stands on the edge of the airfield and watches the Mustangs return. Counts them 1, 2, 5, 8, 12, all of them coming home. Not always. Not every mission. War doesn't work that way, but more than before, and that's enough. December. The mission that opens this story. Marcus holding steady at 28,000 feet, with his engine temperature in the red but not climbing. Below him, the bombers are getting massacred. Flak so thick it looks solid. German fighters swarming like wasps. He dives into it. His Mustang screams down through the gray sky. Speed building. 500 miles per hour. 550. The controls stiffen. The wings vibrate. But the engine stays cool. That modified scoop drinking in the thin air. Feeding the radiator. Keeping everything balanced. He comes up behind a Focke-Wulf 190. Fires. Sees his tracers walk across the enemy's wing. The 190 shudders, rolls, doesn't pull out of the roll. Just keeps going down and down until it disappears into the clouds. Marcus pulls up hard. G-forces crushing him into his seat. Vision tunneling. But he comes out level. Engine purring, another 190 on his right. He banks, fires, misses. The 190 breaks left. Marcus follows. They spiral down together, two predators locked in a death dance. At 15,000 feet, Marcus gets the angle. Fires. The 190 comes apart. Wing shearing off. Fuselage tumbling. Marcus doesn't watch it fall. He climbs back up to the bombers. The fight lasts 30 minutes. Feels like 30 hours. When it's over, his ammunition is gone. His fuel is low. But his engine is still cool. He forms up with what's left of his squadron. 7 Mustangs out of 12. They shepherd the bombers home. Across Germany. Across France. Across the Channel. When England appears through the clouds, Marcus wants to cry. On the ground, Eddie is waiting. Always waiting. Marcus climbs down. His legs almost give out. Eddie catches his elbow. 3 of them, Marcus says. His voice is hoarse. "I got 3 today. Engine never quit," Eddie nods. "Good. I'm alive because of you. You're alive because you're a good pilot." "No." Marcus shakes his head. "I'm alive because you broke the rules." Eddie looks at him, then looks away. "Rules don't win wars," he says quietly. "People do." January 1944. A memo comes down from 8th Air Force Command. Subject: Field modifications to P-51 radiator intake system. The memo acknowledges reports of improved thermal performance in certain aircraft. It requests detailed documentation of the modification, schematics, test data, performance analysis. Captain Harlow hands the memo to Eddie in the hangar. "They want to know what you did," Harlow says. Eddie reads it twice. His hands are shaking. "Am I in trouble, sir?" Harlow almost smiles. "No, Sergeant. They want to approve it. Make it official. Roll it out across the theater." Eddie sits down on a toolbox, heavily, like his strings just got cut. "They're going to use it?" he asks. "If the numbers check out. You need to document everything. Measurements, angles, airflow calculations, whatever you got." Eddie looks at his hands, scarred, grease-stained, bleeding along the knuckles. "I don't got numbers," he says. I just made it work." Harlow pulls up a crate, sits across from him. "Then we'll reverse engineer it," Harlow says. "Measure what you built. Write it down. Make it official. You did the hard part, Eddie. You figured it out. Now we just got to explain it to the brass." Eddie nods slowly. That night he doesn't sleep. He sits in the hangar with a ruler and a notebook and a calculator. Measures every angle, every curve, every dimension of the scoop he built by instinct and desperation. The math takes him 3 days. When he's done, He has 17 pages of calculations and 12 detailed drawings. He hands them to Harlow. Harlow flips through them, whistles low. You did all this without schooling? No engines, sir. Yeah, you do. February. The modification becomes official. Technical Order 0160JE336 approved for installation on all P-51B and P-51C. Aircraft in the European theater. Eddie's name isn't on it. The official documentation credits North American Aviation's Engineering Department. Lists it as a field-developed improvement to radiator cooling efficiency. Eddie doesn't care. He stands on the flight line and watches 50 Mustangs take off into the gray morning. Every single one of them has his scoop, his design, his work. They climb toward Germany, toward altitude, toward combat, and their engines stay cool. March 1944, Berlin. The first American fighters over the German capital. Marcus is there. 29,000 feet. Engine temperature perfect. He can see the city below. The heart of the Reich, the place they said fighters couldn't reach, but here he is around him. Dozens of Mustangs, all of them flying deep. Flying high, flying impossible. The German fighters come up to meet them. But the Mustangs don't turn back. Don't overheat. Don't fail, the air war changes that day. April, Eddie gets a letter. Official stationery. 8th Air Force Headquarters, it's not long. 2 paragraphs. It thanks him for his contribution to the war effort. It notes that his modification has resulted in measurably improved combat effectiveness and reduced mechanical failure rates. It says his work is an exemplary demonstration of American ingenuity and dedication. It's signed by a general whose name Eddie doesn't recognize. He folds it carefully, puts it in his footlocker under his bunk, doesn't show anyone. That evening, Marcus finds him in the hangar. Heard you got a letter from HQ, Marcus says. Word travels fast. You gonna frame it? Eddie shrugs. Probably not. Marcus leans against the workbench. You know what you did, right? You changed the war. That scoop of yours, it's on every Mustang now. Every theater. Europe, Pacific, everyone's using it. I just fixed a problem. You saved lives, Eddie, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Eddie looks at him. This pilot. This kid who's 23 years old and has already killed a dozen men and will probably die before he turns 24. The odds say so. The numbers don't lie. I just wanted you to come home, Eddie says quietly. Marcus's throat works. He nods, can't speak. May 1944. The air over France is crowded. D-Day is coming. Everyone knows it. The tempo of missions increases. 2 a day, sometimes 3. The Mustangs fly top cover, escort, interdiction, they're everywhere. Invincible at altitude. Eddie works until his hands bleed. Keeps the birds flying. Keeps them cool. Keeps them alive. One evening a new pilot approaches him. Lieutenant Tommy Reese, fresh out of training. 18 years old. Looks about 15. You're Kowalski? Tommy asks. Yeah, I just wanted to say, I heard about what you did. The cooling thing. My instructor back in Florida said you're the reason we can fight at altitude now. Eddie doesn't know what to say. Tommy swallows. I just wanted to say thank you, sir. Eddie's not an officer. Doesn't deserve the sir, but he doesn't correct him. Fly safe, kid, Eddie says. 3 days later, Tommy Reese doesn't come back from a mission. Shot down over Normandy. Maybe he got out. Maybe he's a prisoner. Maybe he's dead, Eddie will never know. He stands in the hangar that night and stares at Tommy's Mustang. Empty, waiting for a pilot who won't return. He thinks about all the planes he's fixed, all the modifications he's made, all the lives he's tried to save. You can't save them all, the math doesn't work that way, but you try. Every day, every mission. You try on June 6, 1944. D-Day, the sky over Normandy is filled with aircraft. Thousands of them, fighters and bombers and transports. An aerial armada. Marcus is there, 31,000 feet. Engine cool. He watches the invasion unfold below. The beaches, the smoke, the tiny boats cutting white lines through the grey water. History happening in real time. His radio crackles with voices, urgent, frantic, reports of German fighters. But not many. The Luftwaffe is dying, bled dry by months of attrition. The Mustangs own the sky now. Marcus thinks about Eddie, wonders if he's awake, if he's listening to the radio, if he knows that this moment, This impossible, beautiful, terrible moment is happening because a mechanic in a muddy hangar decided to break the rules. August. Eddie gets orders reassignment back to the States. Training command. They want him to teach other mechanics his techniques. He doesn't want to go, but he doesn't have a choice. The night before he leaves, the squadron throws him a party in the mess hall. Warm beer and cold sandwiches and speeches he doesn't hear. All the pilots are there. The ones still alive. 23 faces out of 47 he's known. Marcus stands up, raises his tin cup. To Eddie Kowalski, Marcus says, "The man who made us invincible." The room echoes with shouts and laughter, and the clink of metal on metal. Eddie looks at them. These boys, these killers, these heroes, these children. "I didn't make you invincible," he says quietly. The room falls silent. "I just gave you a better chance." He leaves the next morning, dawn, his duffel over his shoulder. Marcus walks him to the truck. They don't say much. Everything that matters has already been said, but at the last moment Marcus grabs his hand. "Holds it. I'm gonna make it," Marcus says. "I'm gonna survive this. And when I do, I'm gonna find you. And I'm gonna buy you the biggest damn steak in America." Eddie smiles. "I'm gonna hold you to that." He climbs into the truck. It pulls away. He doesn't look back, and the war ends. May 1945 in Europe. August in the Pacific. The Mustangs come home. Or most of them. Some stay in Europe. Graveyards and museums and memories. Eddie spends the last year of the war in Texas, teaching, explaining, demonstrating. His modification becomes standard. Not just on Mustangs. The principles get applied to other aircraft. Other systems. After the war, he goes back to Detroit. Back to Packard. Back to building engines for cars. He marries a nurse named Helen, has 2 kids. Lives in a small house on a quiet street. He never talks about the war, not to his wife. Not to his kids. Not to anyone. But sometimes, on summer evenings, he hears an airplane overhead. Just a small civil plane, Cessna or Piper. The sound of a reciprocating engine. And he stops whatever he's doing. Looks up, listens. 1963. Eddie is 56 years old, working in his garage, rebuilding a carburetor for a neighbor's Chevy. A car pulls up outside. He doesn't recognize it. A man gets out, tall, lean, gray at the temples. Walking with a slight limp, Eddie straightens. Wipes his hands on a rag. The man comes closer, smiles. "Hello, Eddie." Eddie stares. The face is older, harder, but he knows it, Marcus. Yeah, they stand there. 2 old men who were once young. Who once lived in the thin, cold air above Europe where death was always 1 degree too hot. "You said you'd find me," Eddie says. "Took me a while. Had to track you down." "You're not in the phone book." "I like it that way," Marcus nods. "I get that." They go inside. Helen makes coffee. The 2 men sit at the kitchen table. For a long time they don't talk about the war. They talk about kids, jobs, cars, the weather. But eventually, inevitably, the conversation turns. "I flew 93 missions," Marcus says quietly. "Shot down 11 enemy aircraft. Got shot down once myself. Walked out of Belgium with the resistance. They gave me medals. DFC, Silver Star, all that." Eddie listens. "But the thing I'm most proud of," Marcus says, "is that I came home. And I came home because of you." Eddie shakes his head. "You came home because you were good. And lucky. Maybe, but that scoop you built gave me a chance I wouldn't have had otherwise. Gave all of us a chance." Eddie looks at his hands. Old now, scarred, still strong. "I just did what needed doing," he says. "I know," Marcus says. "That's what made it matter." They talk for hours, until the sun sets. Until Helen brings out sandwiches. Until the coffee pot is empty. When Marcus finally leaves, he shakes Eddie's hand at the door. "Thank you," Marcus says. "I never said it right. Never had the words. But thank you." Eddie nods. "Can't speak." Marcus drives away. Eddie stands in his driveway and watches the taillights disappear down the street. Helen comes up beside him, takes his hand. "Who was that?" she asks. "An old friend," Eddie says. "Someone I helped once." He seemed grateful. I guess he was. They go inside. Eddie Kowalski dies in 1979. Heart attack. Quick. No pain. The obituary in the Detroit Free Press is 3 sentences. It says he worked at Packard, that he served in World War II, that he's survived by his wife and 2 children. It doesn't mention the P-51 Mustang, doesn't mention the scoop, doesn't mention the thousands of missions, the hundreds of lives, the course of the air war, because Eddie never told anyone, not officially. He carried it quietly. Like he carried everything. Just a mechanic who saw a problem and fixed it. Who broke the rules because the rules weren't working. Who saved lives because that's what you do. You try. At the funeral, an old man with a cane and grey hair sits in the back row. He doesn't speak to the family. Doesn't introduce himself. Just sits there, silent, listening. Marcus Webb, 72 years old. Retired engineer, married, 4 kids. 8 grandchildren. A life built on borrowed time. When the service ends, he walks up to the casket, places his hand on the polished wood. "Thank you," he whispers, "for everything." Then he turns and walks out into the sunlight. There's a museum now. The National Museum of the United States Air Force in Ohio. They have a P-51 Mustang hanging from the ceiling. Pristine. Beautiful. Silver wings catching the light. Underneath, a placard. It talks about the Mustang's range, its speed, its kill ratio. It mentions the Merlin engine, the laminar flow wing, the ventral radiator system. It says, field modifications by maintenance personnel improved cooling efficiency at high altitude, contributing to the aircraft's exceptional performance. Eddie's name isn't there, but his work is. In every rivet, every curve, every mission that came home night, quiet. Somewhere over the Atlantic, a modern jet flies at 38,000 feet. Passengers asleep in their seats, unaware of the thin, cold air outside, unaware of the engineering that keeps them alive. But someone designed that aircraft. Someone solved the problems of pressure and temperature and stress. Someone made it possible, just like Eddie, just like 1,000 engineers and mechanics and technicians whose names no one remembers. The people who see the problem, who imagine the solution, who build it with their hands and hope it works. The people who don't ask for credit, who just want everyone to come home, and maybe that's the truth of it. The real story of war isn't always about the heroes in the sky, the aces, the medals, the glory. Sometimes it's about the mechanic in the hangar, working alone in the middle of the night, breaking the rules, trusting his instincts, doing what needs to be done, not for fame, not for recognition, just because someone has to. And sometimes, the smallest change, the angle of a scoop, the flow of air, the decision to try makes all the difference between survival and death, between victory and defeat, between coming home and never coming home. Eddie Kowalski understood that. He didn't need anyone to tell him. He just knew. And because he knew, hundreds of pilots flew higher, fought harder, and lived longer. Because one mechanic decided that the rules could be bent, that ingenuity mattered more than approval, that saving lives was worth the risk. The sky is empty. Now, peaceful. The war has been over for decades, but somewhere, in a quiet hangar or a dusty warehouse or a private collection, there's a P-51 Mustang with a modified radiator scoop. The Kowalski scoop. Unofficial, unapproved, unforgotten. And if you look close enough, you can still see the hand-cut rivets, the careful metalwork, the fingerprints of a man who believed that good enough wasn't good enough. That excellence required risk. That invincibility isn't about being fearless. It's about being prepared. And sometimes, it's about a mechanic who cared enough to break the rules. That night, I learned that the greatest acts of heroism aren't always visible from the sky. Sometimes they happen in the quiet dark, where a pair of hands reshapes metal and hope into something that keeps us alive.